Welcome back to Garage Money Pit. May I introduce you to my SAAB 9.3 winter beater. I have to say, even by my standards of messing up vehicle purchases, this one probably takes the cake somewhat. It's pretty good body-wise. There's one area of rust, I'll show that to you in a second. But other than that, it's actually in pretty good shape. As a lot of these, it has suffered from what I think is a little bit of neglect. The local shop that tends to do all the work that I outsource did a good job. They had to rebuild the rear brakes. They were just low, needed new rotors and brake pads. Needed a few other small things, coolant flush. Then the water pump went out, so it's got a new water pump. But the main issue with this thing is, like a lot of these with the T7 Trionic engine management, it's got a perpetual check engine light. We did have a bad MAF on it, so that one has been replaced. But there are still what I think probably either vacuum leaks or otherwise air leaks that confuse the system. So all in all, not my best purchase. And here's pretty much the only piece of rust I found on this. So for a car that's at least lived part of its time in Pennsylvania, that's pretty good. Again, pretty sure, and I knew that when I bought it, pretty sure the rear bumper has been replaced, not quite sure why. Didn't find any traces of an accident in there. And yes, it's dirty, I apologize. This gets used despite its current problems. And, well, let's get it into the workshop before I freeze out here. So you can see it's pretty stock under the bonnet. Mice did a bit of a number on some of the insulation, but that's okay. It does need to be cleaned up. You can see that like leaves everywhere. A little more concerning is that it's low on coolant again. I just had the water pump changed. I had to because I couldn't do it myself. And given that it is buried somewhere down here, probably didn't want to either, but in this case I just couldn't. So we have to top it up and see if it was just burping the coolant, because obviously it had to be partially drained, or if there's actually a leak. Other than that, again, it's lots of minor stuff, like this thing here being loose. The other thing is I need to check the boost control valve because it's starting to honk, and it's got a code for that as well. So to have a quick look at the interior. This is the base model for the US, which is the SE, so it's already turbocharged. I think leather was stock back then as well. Heated leather front seats, they're in pretty decent shape, as you can see. Floor mats are something, but they're not the original ones. It is missing the rear headrests. Headliner's coming down a little bit back there. That's a common problem with a lot of Saabs. Other than the fuel receipt, leather's in pretty good shape overall. It's got the luggage cover as well. It's reasonably clean inside. Leather could do with a little bit of feeding and caring. The important thing for me is everything works, including this display, which is notorious for breaking. So again, this was a relatively cheap car, relative given the current situation with cars in the US. For what it is, it wasn't quite in the shape I thought it was in, so it does need some work. As you can see, like every good Saab with the T7, it's got a check engine light. This is part of what I need to figure out. The good news is it generally drives okay. It's not spectacular. I like the old ones better, but it does seem to work. Okay, as you can see, I've removed the beauty cover. The first few items to check are the boost control valve, which is this thing. As I mentioned in my intro, the car is starting to honk a bit, which is a typical sign of this valve going bad. There's a relatively easy test. Apparently, if you blow in through here and you can feel air coming out the other way, it's bad. So we'll remove that, we'll check that. The other thing I wanted to do, replace these boost control hoses. So there's one from the valve to the control system, and then you can see these two go into the intake manifold. I have silicone vacuum hoses for that, so even though they don't look like they're damaged, we'll pull them out, we'll replace them. It's a cheap-ish fix for a problem that may or may not be there. I'll quickly check any of the other hoses, check for other leaks. The other hoses in that area are basically for the PCV system, which is notorious on these. And if I can't find anything here, we'll obviously check this hose. And then we have the intercooler hoses down here. Those I need to check from underneath. Plus I also have to look for coolant leaks. So we'll put the car on ramps in a little bit. Okay, and this is what we're going to use to replace the vacuum lines. So I've got some silicone vacuum hose from Summit Racing. Not going to film replacing them. So these definitely feel stiffer than the rubber ones that are on there. And I don't know if the rubber ones are blocked. Okay, and here's how you're supposed to, allegedly, how you're supposed to test the boost control valve. The valve is supposed to be bad if you blow in through the control hole and you can basically feel air coming out. As I didn't quite fancy doing mouth to mouth on this thing, I've already hooked up the silicone line, so let's see what happens. So apart from looking weird on the internet, nothing happened, so this seems to hold. But honestly, it feels okay from the blow-through test, so we'll have to see. This does not appear to be the problem, so there goes the easy fix. Okay, so I may have to revise this a little bit. May have listened on the wrong hole, or actually felt on the wrong hole. So, if I redo this, you can barely hear it, but if I'm blowing into the tube, I'm hearing air flow on this particular outlet. I thought I needed to check this one, but this one, I can hear air leaking. If I'm using my vacuum tester, it's actually sucking air through unless I close this valve. So this might actually still be a bad valve. Because my understanding is this should be isolated, because once you apply vacuum here, it should open the valve, right? But if I have suction from here through there, that doesn't feel right to me. I don't know if you can hear it over the racket from the engine, but there's a hissing noise coming from somewhere down there. So I suspect that is the vacuum leak that is triggering the check engine light. Well, that's it so far with this particular disaster. I have to do some research and figure out what the problem is here. Again, I can hear a vacuum leak here. I don't know if you could hear it as well, but there's definitely some vacuum leak on the intake side that I need to address. Unless this is normal, it might be. I haven't owned one of these before. Anyway, thank you very much for watching and see you soon.